All right, so we're going to be doing something very unique and very interesting for us this year. What we're trying to do, again, with this Unconference, as I talked about in the beginning, is to tap what's interesting and the knowledge base of the community of people who are attending. So that's what we're about to do. Before I do that, though, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the last 2.5 days of content. Has it been a good experience for you, I hope? Thank you very much. I do want to commend Dan and the entire program committee. Can we please give them a big round of applause? They worked very hard to put this content together for you. And now we're going to get to the community building. So again, you know, there have been a lot of talking heads, a lot of great, inspired, and passionate people who are trying to make your jobs better. But now what we're going to do is we're going to tap the knowledge that you have by undergoing this Unconference session. So remember, Dan's going to walk you through how we're going to get this organized. But it's all about participation. So it's all about the conversations you're going to have on the particular topics that are of interest to you, and then bringing the results of those conversations to share with the entire community. It could be very powerful, but it's all about participation. So I invite you to roll up your sleeves, enjoy the conversations, be a part of the solution, not part of the problem, as they say, and enjoy this Unconference. I hope this becomes a way that we close out MacIT every time that we do it, because I think there's a lot of power and a lot of promise in doing this. So again, I'm Paul. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Enjoy this last part of MacIT, and I look forward to seeing you guys again very soon.
Thanks, Paul. So a couple of days ago when we opened this up, one statement that I made was that we up here are not really any different from you out there, except that we're up here. But you guys in general probably know just as much as we do. So what we want to do with this Unconference is leverage not only your expertise, but also help you frame the questions so that we as a community have a better understanding of the problems that we face. And maybe some of you have already solved these problems, so as a group we can come together with solutions for these well-framed problems or questions. So that's the whole point of this, is to do this crowdsourcing thing, but we know what we're talking about. So, given the tweets that you sent to us and some of the problems and questions that we identified, we've come up with 7 general questions, and hence I've got 7 people here that are going to facilitate in the crowd. That is, I'll tell you what the questions or the problems are. And each one of these questions or problems is identified with one of these people. As I tell you what the question is, I'm going to tell you who the facilitator is. That person will stand up, and then they'll go to a region. And if you like that question, either because you don't know and you really need to know, or you do know and you think everybody else should know, then go with that person. We'll give you 45 minutes-ish to discuss the problem. If you want to reframe the problem, that's fine. Come up with a solution, elect somebody who will come up here to the lectern and speak the question, and then give us the answer. So, we'll take a few minutes to get everybody organized at the tables, then we'll go through the discussion, then at a certain point, it'll be really loud in here, so I may have to yell over the microphone to get your attention. And each group will have somebody come up and give that question. I hope the person who comes up to give the question and answer is not one of the facilitators. I'd actually like to get someone from the group of attendees to come up and give that reframed question and good solution. So, one of the questions that we had was, in case you haven't heard, Office 365 is now live out there on the App Store. It includes Outlook. It's a pay-per-year situation, so you get to rent Outlook as part of Office 365. But what if you use Outlook and 365 is a little different? So our question is, split out Exchange from Office 365. Sorry, Exchange, not Outlook. Exchange, split out Exchange from Office 365 as their separate products with separate issues. John Welsh, who's down here at the end, John, give us a wave. John is going to handle that because John loves Exchange. And I don't mean that sarcastically. Exchange is a good thing. So if you have problems with Exchange and you want to raise a voice in this issue, go with John. Second question, being a Mac sysadmin in a Windows and or Linux IT group. I imagine a lot of us are like that. Some of you may be in K-8, K through 12, where it's all Macs and you don't have to worry about it, but a lot of us in the corporate world are a Mac minority and a Windows majority, or maybe even a Linux majority. So Duncan McCracken, he'll be your facilitator. If you have problems or you have solutions, go with Duncan. Number 3, AD/OD, that is Active Directory and Open Directory, also integrating OS X into AD using the native method or some third-party middleware. That is, are you really good at configuring the plugin, or do you just want to go out and buy Centrify? I made my choice long ago, but that's a question for you. So Kevin Snook will be facilitating that. If AD is your thing and you know how to do it, or you really hate it, go with Kevin. Number 4, this one is close to my heart because I did log files for a long time. So, log files, what do you read? What do you look for in log files? Do you aggregate your log files, or do you just use them once in a while for troubleshooting? Do you pull them all together in a central repository? What is your retention policy for log files? So, log files, everything about log files, that's Eric. Next, imaging and deployment. What do you use? How well does it work for you? What problems do you have? Have any of your problems been solved this week in the imaging and deployment sessions? Kevin White. Next, how much penetration is OS X seeing in enterprise or corporate environments? We hear about this anecdotally. I mean, we all read in the press that the enterprise, the corporate, the government is seeing more Mac OS X, but I consider that anecdotal. What are the reports from the field? Are you one of those people who now suddenly you went from supporting 10 to 100 to 1,500 and it's unexpected and it's not planned for? Let's hear about it. So that would be Justin Laborio, and Justin has unique insight to that because he works with a big company that you would think has more Macs. Final, this will be with Nadine, and this is issues around mobility and mobile devices, basically iOS and integrating iOS. So if you have issues or you have really good solutions, things that work for you, go with Nadine. Okay, so my facilitators, I'm going to let you guys self-organize, find a place. Now, here's where you, the attendees, have to figure out where you're going to go, who you're going to go with. So as you're self-organizing, and since I have a microphone, I will repeat all those topics. Split out Exchange from Office 365. That's John Welsh. Number 2, being a Mac sysadmin in a Windows and or Linux IT group. That's Duncan McCracken. Number 3, AD/OD. How do you integrate OS X? That's Kevin Snook. Number 4, log files. Eric Dreyer. Log files all the way in the back. Number 5, imaging and deployment. That's Kevin White. Kevin White is up here in the corner to my left, stage right. Number 6, how much penetration is OS X seeing in the corporate world? That's Justin Laborio to my right, or stage left. Justin's all alone. How much penetration for OS X? Excellent. Number 7, Issues around mobility and mobile devices, that's Nadine. She's right up here in front of me. And facilitators, I will turn you loose. You guys go for it. Ding, 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 ding. Time is up. So let's just stay seated where you are, and I'll call out each group. Justin's group. So when you get up here, let us know who you are. If it matters to you, let us know where you're from, company, geographic location. Most importantly, let us know the question or the problem, and then let us know your group's summary answer.
All right. That's right. Hello. I'm Jeff Fessenoff. I'm a native San Francisco, so welcome everybody who's been visiting San Francisco here. All that. I'm working at Ericsson. It's a 100,000 person company, 187 countries, but in our group we range from teams, companies worth of 50 people to 200 to 500 to a couple thousand to 100,000, et cetera. We were focusing on how much penetration in the OS X seeing in enterprise or corporate environments. So we were looking at a couple things, top areas where Apple should do more. We looked at, in the discussion, some of us weren't aware that GSX was available for support, et cetera. So better communication from Apple on GSX and communication on the Apple support agreements was important. We're looking at some additional enterprise-level services that some of us are going to resellers to acquire, such as procuring machines and then enrolling them into a jam system or providing additional services. Apple provides some of these services, but if you only buy them in bulk at that one time, not over a larger period of time, so there's a schism between that and the enterprise. The top issues to focus on in this area to expand the number of Macs. So by the way, as we did kind of a count of how many machines in our general environments in our population were, none of us reached above 10% of it for number of Macs on the system. We were focusing on the Mac OS specifically. So a couple things that we wanted to look at was brought up in discussion was the importance of having your vendor and application selection groups include the Mac in those requirements. Don't let a vendor in to introduce a new product or service or technology into your company if it's not Mac compliant, Thank you. The other part of the puzzle is the right fit of users who will be successful on the Mac. We mentioned finance departments with SOX requirements that may not be quite there yet. Some people, when they hear you're introducing Macs, will say, great, brand new computer, It's not quite a Windows machine, but I never used one. I used an iPad before, and this should be fine, right? And then they go, where's the docking station? Where do I put this, What do you mean I need an adapter? That's that kind of thing.
And you have personal experience.
I have
with
personal
it.
experience with this. I've run a pilot of 300 machines in San Jose and Texas, and we're expanding to a full 1,000, including 2 different countries, United States and Sweden this year at Ericsson. And so the right fit of users is important to make that match. We talked about where there are still Windows-only applications out there that certain groups use. Some are really high technical research ones. And yes, you could set up a virtual machine on it and do Windows, but then the cost of that overall, benefits saying you could do it a different way by staying on Windows, keeping them happy is the more important thing. If you're on MS Project daily, you're probably not going to be happy on a Mac, for instance. And then we're looking at procurements through resellers or direct from Apple as a combination. So resellers provide additional services that I mentioned before. Top things that we can do from an IT services to make it better. A couple of us actually have innovation departments in IT where we go and focus a group of people within the team of IT to go look at that new technology, try it out, introduce it, proof of concept it, and introduce it better than just say, okay, all of a sudden we have nothing, and now we all of a sudden have it, and it's brought forward to the standard IT team that does that. Some people that looks ahead to that structure. Also, the whole break-fix strategy needs to be thought about around the Macs as you're introducing them and expanding them in enterprise. We've seen issues where the well, Apple, you could bring in the Apple Store, that's one thing, but then you're worried about intellectual property, so then you have to have a process around that. You can hire probably a reseller or a provider in your local sites, but we haven't really seen a full, at least I haven't seen, if anybody knows of a good one, in the United States, one vendor who you can deal with in every single city you have offices in, who can go in and you just take the Mac, intellectual property or not, have it under NDA coverage of repair. And so that was one option. The other option that a lot of the groups here had started to do was actually training in-house staff to provide that certified Apple repair, be part of the GSX program, probably the best scalable solution in this way, and as you work through it. And that's what we basically covered. Any questions?
Great.
Okay, thank you.
I noticed that Duncan and Ben, you sort of joined your groups. Are you going to do a joint presentation, or are they separate? Okay. Okay, well, Duncan, is your group ready? So give us who you are, a little background if you like, question and answer.
Hello, I'm Ian Sokoloff. I'm with Reed Elsevier. We're a major publishing conglomerate. Some of you who work in some of the technical areas might be using some of our Morgan Kaufman books or our Singris books if you're in the security area, you're familiar with
Yes.
our stuff. Moderately big multinational enterprise, probably about 35,000 users worldwide, probably 1% to 2% max. Was design groups primarily, and now a little more executives and filtering out, but a lot of the things that the previous group touched upon is certainly relevant to our discussions and to my particular environment. Our topic being a Mac sysadmin in a Windows and or Linux-centric IT group. So the first question, which was, top areas for Apple should be doing more in particular areas around this, we pretty quickly discarded that and said, Apple will do what Apple will do, and they're responsive, as has been mentioned many times in this conference, more to the users than to IT. So really, if we want a better situation, it's up to us to find ways to make things better as people in the enterprises and not expect the outside vendors to be all that capable of doing it for us. There were three particular areas, though, that we did think needed addressing. One was the isolation factor, both of systems in an infrastructure which is not well suited for them, and of the users who, were not necessarily able to communicate as effectively with a cultural infrastructure that was not receptive to them. Also, the idea of policy driven by product. A vendor comes in, gives a dog and pony presentation that's impressive to the executives. They say, oh, it looks good to us, we'll save some money, or get a whiz-bang feature. But hey, it's not Mac compatible. Nobody thought about that when they bought the product. The question of level 1 support, and that we as admins might have some Mac expertise which we can apply in trying to come up with solutions, but the users aren't really necessarily going to interface all that directly with the admins most of the time. They're going to interface with support, and you kind of need that knowledge or ability to be friendly to Macs to permeate the organization and not just be on the admin side or just on the user side. So how do we deal with some of these things? Largely, although of course there are product incompatibilities, as we thought about the problem, the real problems in organizations we thought were more human than technical. And so the solutions have to be more human than technical. We have to build relationships was really the primary thing we came up with in terms of being in the Mac ghetto, as it were, and having to deal with the majority that was of a different faith. Building relationships is the way to begin getting out of that. Know who the players are who can help you in doing the things that you need to get done, and reach out to them and cultivate relationships. Let them know you're not alien or strange. You're just another person in the same role as them, trying to do the same things they are and accomplish what the organization is trying to accomplish. Encourage curiosity and learning. I mean, naturally, even though they're Windows admins, they're still geeky nerds who tend to have a curious streak. So play upon that. They're interested in learning things. They're interested in new technology. So try to excite them a little bit. Carrots, not sticks. From curiosity, you build interest. You build. You offer them opportunities for learning. You come in when one of our people did brown bags with them, or give them training and help them bridge that gap once you've given them some incentive to do so. The iPhone halo effect is your friend. iPhones and iPads, we are finding, are doing good things in terms of creating an interest in, hey, that Apple stuff might be okay. It might not be something that's going to blow up in our faces or destroy our carefully structured worlds. It can be even kind of fun. So get them iOS, and maybe that leads to a little more tolerance or interest in Mac OS. So those are some of the things that we looked at. Really, if you can, try to get to decision makers, and you should be doing this anyway, but obviously this is not happening. Try to reinforce the message that policy and therefore solutions should be proceeding from the problem and the intent, not from product. And IT groups tend to have processes that have kind of gotten a little ossified over time, which are a little bit vendor driven, and obviously organizations should be looking at solutions that are organizationally driven and not driven by external factors. And so you really want to try to reinforce that message. Another point that we noticed is that terminology can have a big impact. One little trick, but in some organizations can go a very long way, is don't say Mac. Say alternate platform. In a lot of organizations, Macs are an alternate platform, but there are others. And in some organizations that are polyglot enough, you might find that enough minorities can actually make a majority. Windows may only be a plurality. So, rather than emphasizing the difference, put yourself in a slightly bigger tent and you might have a little more clout.
I might also suggest be at least a little bit familiar with the tools that the majority platform uses.
Yeah, we did touch upon that, the fact that certainly within our group, it did seem that there was a lot more openness within the people who were Mac-centric or came from a Mac background to learning what the other guys were doing than from the other camps to learning what the Mac guys were doing. And we thought that was just a natural consequence of any minority in a majority environment. You have to be willing to make some accommodation. You have to understand that it's going to be easier for you to play with them than for them to play with you, or to at least have incentive to do so. So that was pretty much most of what we covered.
Good, thank you. Let's welcome to the stage the Exchange Group. Did you have a selectee, John?
They're smarter than I. And swifter.
It's the slow buffalo that gets shot.
Yes. Get off my leg, you piranha. Stupid piranhas on the leg. I'm John Welch, Director of IT for the Zimmerman Agency. As is fairly common with discussions of email platforms, there weren't specifically answerable questions. We all agreed that email sucks. We hate it. We hate everything about it. A lot of it just, there's still a lot of confusion about Office 365 and the recent changes and how that's going to shake out for Outlook on the desktop for both Windows and the Mac. How the server's going to work. Different interesting things about hosted Office environments like encryption at rest, that kind of thing. And just finding how to find providers. Some talks about when you should and should not use delegation, which is a horribly overused thing when people should just be sharing folders instead. That kind of thing. Also an interesting discussion talking about how the way Outlook 2011 has a database and the Entourage database are two entirely different things linked only by the words Microsoft and database. And me being able to demonstrate that 10 years of email and only a 300 meg database, that's kind of handy. But it, mostly just, we hate email.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and talking about like if you're having problems with Outlook, you should probably keep a very close eye on available memory in the machine, how much RAM you have in there, and the quality of your disk. disk warrior, and if you've got someone whose Outlook is telling them to rebuild their database every day, you probably have volume issues, not just Outlook sucking.
Right.
So.
Right. Sounds good. Thanks. Way in the back, Eric Dreyer's group.
Howdy, I'm Tim Johnson. I work at Stanford within academic computing. It's not too far from here geographically. I was on the logging group. We wanted to talk about log files. We came up with probably 3 areas of concern that might qualify as questions. What is the level of awareness? What's a good way to filter? And then what kind of aggregation is going on? As far as the level of awareness, that applies to both the user level or administrative level, which is us, and the vendor level, which would be Apple and third-party vendors. What Apple and vendors could do is maybe come up with a better standard. Apple could communicate to vendors, here are some great ways to put all your log files in a specific place. Try not to be too verbose all the time. Maybe even set up some specific standards for ways to turn on or off verbose logging that third-party vendors could adhere to. We don't really have any documentation shared on the internet or anywhere else on a wiki for all the different little ways to turn on and off verbose logging for all the different third-party applications there are. If anybody does know of a wiki or something like that, please share. Or if you set one up, also please share. And then from a user administrative standpoint, what's the level of awareness there should be? We think there's a question of whether you should be looking at log files all the time or only when there's a problem. Maybe there's not enough time in the day to be staring at log files all day. But some people have set up a second monitor where they just have logs just flying by all the time. Good filtering can help with that. There were great presentations at MacIT this year about maybe using logs to become more proactive. Then as far as filtering, there's the question of signal to noise. We talked about console.app and different ways to filter there, and of course there's always grep, but you don't always know what to look for, what to exclude. And then the question of aggregation, we all had considered Splunk, but nobody in the group has actually implemented it. No one has actually implemented any of the third-party or open source tools similar to Splunk. We figure this could result in a potential session for next year where maybe somebody in the group has researched Splunk and implemented it. Let's see, notes. There's a question about whether to push logs or pull them. And also if Apple could put maybe a knowledge base up for all these different little defaults commands and other things that you can use to turn on more verbose debug logging. So that's what we came up with.
Good. Thank you. So I'll repeat the question. Joe says that a couple of years ago, actually 2 years in succession, we had Andrea Longo come here and talk about logs. She's from Splunk.
That was cited within our group, and we also discussed how it's nice to have a session based on the user's perspective, so the user actually implementing it, rather than necessarily the vendor talking about what's possible. There could be a joint presentation if Splunk wants to talk with one of the people in this fine group back here about providing a demonstration license so that we can get started and then present next year. So, thanks.
So I'm kind of the poster child for the Splunk guy. I'm the one that got Andrea Longo to come in here both times. It took a lot of convincing. She did a great job, and the reason I say I'm the poster child is because in my shop we implemented Splunk as a log aggregator because there was nothing else that could do it, and I could not physically go out and read all those log files on all those machines. So we bought Splunk, we implemented it. Splunk came to us and said, wow, we didn't know you could do that. Could you come to our conference and tell us how you did that? Okay, that was 2010. Next year will be 2015, so my information will be kind of stale, but I do know some people at Splunk. So no promises, but I'll see if I can get someone to come in, not from the Andrea system and support engineer perspective, but maybe more from the user perspective on how to do it. And if I can't find somebody, then I'll give you mine. Enough of that. Yeah, if we have someone else in the audience, as I said on day one, we, the board, encourage all of you who are probably experts in something to submit to speak at MacIT next year. We like to see new stuff. That's how we get, a number of you are first-time speakers. Some of you are repeat speakers, but a number are first-time speakers, and we just want to keep that going. There are always new things. So if there's someone else here who's, as the Splunk people say, a Splunker, then we have a volunteer. We have a winner. Excellent, excellent. Okay, enough of that Splunk nonsense. 2 words, 4 letters, ADOD. That's Active Directory, Open Directory.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Harvey. I'm the IT director for the Ventura County Star newspaper down in Southern California. Our group was discussing issues with Active Directory and Open Directory integration into a Windows-centric environment, that sort of thing. So top issues that we looked at were policy enforcement. How do you do that sort of thing? How do you enforce password changes or length or expirations? As well as just other things, screensavers, if you have certain applications that you want open for your users, that kind of stuff. Do you do that through native GPOs or third-party? One of the other things we were looking at is more into AD schema, the environment itself. Can you extend it? Do you extend it? Do you have the ability to go in and talk with your AD administrators? Can you buy them a beer? Can you give them Christmas presents? How do you build those relationships if you even have that option? Things like getting your own administrative access to a specific container or an OU within your AD environment so that you can control your own little thing and you're not bugging these guys, that sort of thing. One of the other things is, best practices for deployment. How do you bind your systems to AD? How do you enforce policy? Do you use MCX? Do you use profiles? Do you use third-party tools? To what extent do you use which tools? That kind of a thing. Top of the list for solutions that we came up with was knowing where to go for information. And that's talking about websites like AFP 548 or Mac Enterprise or Mac Windows, any number of other options and tools out there, as well as within your own environment. Talk to those AD administrators. They know that stuff. They can help you. They may not want to help you out of the gate, but that's where social engineering comes in. Talk to these guys. They're your colleagues and your coworkers. Find the ways to engage them and get them to understand what your needs are and how you're trying to operate within their restrictions. Our group had a wide variety. We had education, we had small business, we had consulting, we had enterprise. So there's a whole lot of different factors to consider in that sort of thing. Are you subject to Sarbanes-Oxley requirements? Are you subject to HIPAA? Just a few of the many laws, regulations, company policies, whims of the principle of this of a small company you're supporting or that kind of a thing. Learn how to operate within those environments, within those restrictions, and do the best you can for your group, for your users and the machines and all that sort of thing that you're looking at. Looking outside of the Microsoft Apple bubble, and there's two things there. Open source tools, can you deploy OpenLDAP on a Linux box, that sort of thing. And then also looking at third-party solutions, Centrify, Casper, those are the two big ones we talked about in our group, and the various ways that they're being deployed for, this tool does this thing I want really well, I use this other tool for this other part for, the specific situation, the specific client, that kind of stuff. And I just want to make a last comment. I actually spoke 6 years ago, I think, back in the Tiger days when AD/OD integration was first a major viable tool in the Golden Triangle and that kind of stuff. And I find it really interesting how the space has matured and how the tools are more robust, and there's a lot more knowledge out there and a lot more ability to do a lot more things. Back in 2007, 2008, we were on our own, and it's not the case at all anymore. And it's very interesting for getting Macs into these enterprise or AD environments and seeing, how this is growing and how it's providing optional extra tools for us. And it's very interesting how things are going now and compared to how they were and how they're going to be going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. And it looked like the biggest group was imaging and deployment. Hi, Rich.
To say that we arrived at consensus is perhaps a stretch. I would first of all like to say that we discussed a ton of tools as part of our talk, and I posted them to the Twitter feed under the hashtag MacIT 2014. It is also marked with Unconference. Unfortunately, I forgot the MacIT part, so it's just MacIT 2014 or Unconference. Few takeaways that came away. First of all, two things that Apple could do that would help us in regards to getting ready for new OSs, and also with helping us get ready to deal with the new OS once it has arrived, is first of all, better communication with regards to bug reporting, more transparency into that process. There's a few community ways to do that. Well, actually there's one, which is that after you get done posting your bug report, post it to openradar.appspot.com. That got mentioned in another session, but I just wanted to toss that in. And also some more transparency, and also make the Apple Developer Connection memberships cheaper. I already pay $200 a year. It's the smartest $200 I spend all year. I have no problems paying it. However, I know for some folks, even $200 a year for the budgets you got, that's tight. So one thing Apple could do is make that even cheaper, make it more accessible, because that is how you find out what is coming. That is how you find out, this beta that's coming out, this this information that's coming in from the developer forums. That's how you get access to the WWDC videos. So two things Apple could do. Basically, there's lots of ways to skin this cat. One recommendation that came out of the group is for new machines, if possible, structure your workflows so that the OS that Apple ships with it stays on the machine. If possible, don't wipe it out. Instead, try to configure it in place, because I know one of the constant things that comes up on mailing lists whenever Apple ships a new OS version and then ships new hardware after that OS version is they'll put on a special build. If you use the existing OS that comes on the machine, you get to stop caring about that. If you don't, if you wipe it out and replace it with your own, you have to care about that so much, it's just amazing. So in that regards, I would advocate building your imaging workflows to maybe not even do imaging. Just pull it out of the box, get it to whatever deployment workflow solution you're using. Use packages and scripts to configure what you're doing. Also, don't be afraid of the upgrade process. So say you've got machines that already exist in your environment. Maybe they're running 10.7, maybe they're running 10.6. If you've got 10.5 still like I do, definitely be afraid of the upgrade process. But in general, Apple got a lot right, especially with 10.9.2. You know, they're 10.9.0, 10.9.1, yeah, there could be some problems. 10.9.2 is pretty good. Definitely if you're going from, say, 10.8 to 10.9, don't reimage, just upgrade the machine. Apple's doing a lot right. Maybe if you've got an older machine that you've, shall we say, has had a lot of love and a lot of wear, and you're going up more than one OS level, in that case, back up your stuff, wipe it out, put down that fresh OS image, then bring their stuff back. But otherwise, upgrade. Apple's improved this process a lot. I know there are probably some old timers here who remember things like the 10.3 to 10.4 upgrade process or the 10.4 to 10.5 upgrade process, and remember what a train wreck that was. That's the past. What we have now works. So please, go that route. And also, it's a fast-paced process. If you've got an upgrade process that you know works, give it to your users. Make it available through self-service. Make it easy for them to do, because in that case, it's out of your, it's out of your hair. They can just do it themselves. Of course, that's depending on the needs of your environment and your requirements, but, if the upgrade process is solid and works, you don't necessarily need to be there. So that's another thing that came out of our group. Trying to think what else. If you've got money but not time, find tools that let you leverage the money and let you conserve the time that you have. If you have time but not money, there's tools out there that'll do great jobs as well. Basically, you've got tools like Monkey that do a fantastic job of developing deploying your software. Deploy Studio does a great job of managing your deployment workflows, where you pull it out of the box, it does what it needs to do. There's tools like Create OS 10 Install PKG. All this is in the Twitter feed, by the way, where it'll help you build it'll take an OS installer and put it into an installer package that you can deploy with anything. You want to upgrade OSs with ARD? Knock yourself out. You want to hand this installer package off to your users and have them just double-click and then they can run the OS update themselves? Knock yourselves out. It's that easy. Also, the other thing that came out is for those who are deploying boot camp partitions, I really recommend you take a look at the latest WinClone 4 Professional, I think, because it has this great new feature where you can take your boot camp partition and you can put it into an installer package. So if you're dealing with boot camp partitions and you're like, why can't I just deploy this like I can my Macs? Now you can, maybe. Take a look at it. I really recommend it. Did I miss anything?
I have a question for you. One of the first things you said was to cross-file bug reports into OpenRadar.
Yes.
But you'd also mentioned those bugs that come out of testing the new OS under Apple developers. So
That's correct. If it's under NDA, the place to address that is going to be the Apple developer forums. Do not put anything, basically don't put things into OpenRadar that would be covered by NDA. However, for that, Apple does have the Apple developer forums available. Basically, at that point, what I've done sometimes is I've filed my bug for like a Mavericks developer preview. I've went into the developer forum and said, hey, I just posted this bug. Here's the bug ID. Here's the complete text of my bug. Apple, please fix my bug. Hey, by the way, is anybody else seeing this? And that way, from the responses sometimes, I can go back to that bug report and say, based on this thread, do you know how many people are having this problem? So yeah, use the Apple developer forums. They are your NDA-friendly place to share information if you've got information with Apple that's under NDA, like you do when the developer previews are out.
thank you very much. Well, unless we have any volunteers. Oh, we've got one more group. I'm sorry. Here's my device. Wipe this.
I'm Jason Borkhardt. I'm from State Farm. Really quick about State Farm. I'm from Central Illinois. It was snowing when I left, so I don't want to leave here because it's a lot warmer. We had 3 reoccurring themes in our session. I'm going to add a 4th really quick though, because just like you just did, a lot of people forget that they need to include the Apple mobile platform in their strategies. And that actually will go into, I guess I'll go out of order. The second thing that we had is that a lot of the issues with the Apple mobile platform is that they aren't technology problems, they're people problems, and they're problems with the policies. There are issues that cannot be solved with technology, but by having to talk to your leadership. Somebody else mentioned buy your leadership a beer. Yeah, right, do that. Go work with your leadership, make that relationship, have that discussion with them to say, hey, I don't think this is an issue with the way that we're doing this, or the way that we have this configured. It's a policy thing. It's, hey, why do we have to have users so locked down on this device? Maybe they're not enrolling into our management solution because it's so locked down. We're not empowering our users. We're trying to restrict them too much. So that is absolutely a people and a policy issue as opposed to a technology issue. Another one of our points is going to be that phones have evolved a lot faster than computers did. You know, computers have been around for a long time. We didn't run antivirus on them when they first came out. It took a long time for those evolutionary steps to happen. They've been around for tens and tens of years versus this device I have in my pocket right now. It wasn't around 10 years ago. Right now, I've got instant gratification for any amount of anything that I want to look up. I was out last night and we wanted to know where one of us came from. And I was able to just pull it out of my pocket and find out. That evolves so fast that it's really hard to keep up with the management tools. How do you manage that? How do you set policy for that? How do you get in front of this quick evolution that has happened in the mobile area as opposed to in the computing area? We've had a long time to kind of say, okay, well, here's where we think it's going to go. It's taken a long time to get the next operating system even, so we can plan for that. We've got a new iPhone coming out almost every year, and with Android phones, you've got a new Android phone coming out every other day. It's so fragmented. How do you know about all the features that are inside of them, and how do you manage those features? And then somebody else made a point is, okay, well, whose job is it to stay on top of this stuff? Whose job is it to be aware of all these new features? Is it not my MDM's job? Why do I pay my MDM? They should be the ones that stay on top of all this, and I should just use that. Well, if you don't know about the feature in the phone, how can you use your MDM provider to manage that? Pam was actually just saying that she was talking about all these new features and the Apple configurator that was just released. She doesn't sit there every day. How is she supposed to know that there are these new features and there are new ways to control these devices? It's not Apple's job to inform her every little piece of the puzzle. She has to know what these things are. And maybe Apple's a bad example. So let's say Casper, it's not Jamf's job to say, hey, here's every little new feature that Apple just implemented. It's your job to know how to use that tool. And maybe you pay for training, but that's the thing, it is definitely a struggle. The last thing is use a checklist. Ben Greiner actually just had a session right before this. There he is right there. Make a checklist. There are a lot of issues that you need to work through just with onboarding and offboarding. You need to know what your processes are for getting somebody on your network. What are the steps to get an Android device on versus an iPad versus an iPhone? What are your steps to get that off the network? And let's say I work for company A. I leave the company, it's my personal phone. I'm going to go work for company B with a different MDM provider. What are the steps that you need to take to make sure that you can successfully control that device, manage it, and successfully get it off the network? Almost everything that I've talked about today was not a specific technology issue. It wasn't, hey, you need to change this specific setting to make it work. There's a lot of policy, procedural, and people issues, and I think that that's really the main focus in the mobile world.
Right. Very good. Thanks. Well, unless anybody has comments or questions, or Nadine, did you want to have a final word? No?
I'm not entirely certain why Dan thought that I was the person to close this out, but I will anyway. So thank you so much for trying this out with us. Not only the Unconference today, but all of MacIT. We had an awesome week in my ever humble and completely unbiased opinion. We mentioned one thing earlier. Please tell us. Please submit feedback about what we did right this year and what you'd like to see more of next year. We tried this Unconference for the first time this year. Let us know what worked and what didn't about it. And also, you've learned a lot this week, and you've had a lot of questions come up this week. Right now, your brain is overflowing with ideas. Jot down what you would like to see at MacIT 2015. You might not be the person who submits it, who comes up with that proposal. You might not be the person to talk about it. Let us know that that's a topic you would like to hear more about next year. And of course, please be thinking about sessions that you would like to present next year. We'll provide an awful lot of help to you if you've never presented at a conference like this, to be able to get up on stage and share what you know with the rest of the community. Thank you so much.
I didn't intend to call you up. I was just going to use your foil, but thanks for coming out. Thanks, everybody. See you out there.